Hello and welcome from Canyon Professional Development. Today's lesson is called Get on Your Feet, Learning with Movement. Our why. We want to tell you why we exist. We want to empower, educate, and inspire you so you take action to fulfill your purpose and serve others. We cannot do this without you. My name is Mike Blakely. I'm currently the math coach at Alhambra High School. I've worked as a teacher, a coach, and an administrator. And I'm very excited that you're going to be working with me today as we work on mastering our craft. Quote for today, motion creates emotion. It's a quote from Tony Robbins. I also remember it being in the movie Boiler Room. Let's think about our expectations for today. I want you to reflect on how you would envision motion used in a classroom. Pause this and unpause it when you're ready to move on. As far as our objectives or goals, we want to talk about 4 things today. 1, how we can start a class with motion in our warming up. Secondly, how we can plan full lessons around motion. Third, how we can utilize technology while still having motion in a classroom. And fourth, how we can do differentiation strategies, or a differentiation strategy in particular, that involves students to be up and moving throughout class. The first one, warming up, adding motion to the start of our class. Think about this. Students sit at school for about as long as they sleep at night. So breaking that trend can really help to get their brains functioning a little bit more. So I want you to reflect back on your favorite childhood class and your least favorite childhood class. I want you to remember, what did it feel like when you walked in? What did it look like? Why were you either excited to go to class or why were you not excited to go to class? Think about that, unpause it when you're ready to move on. The typical class, when you walk in for a warm-up, has problems posted either on the board, a piece of paper that you walk in. Somehow the teacher gives you a little activity to do as you start. For the teacher moves, teachers take attendance, and they might have a few minutes to collect items or to check in with a few students. Then the students typically sit pretty quietly or possibly sit in groups, do the activity. Some teachers collect it, some teachers go over it, but typically there's just some 5-minute quiet work to start class. So now what if we start changing that a little bit? We want to break some of those trends. We could use one of these strategies. Maybe one's answer with your feet. Then maybe the students do come in, they answer a question while you're taking attendance, but then you have them move to different locations in the room depending on what their answer is. Then they could talk it out with whoever's there and share out their answers. Maybe you have boards in your room. I know my current room has dry erase boards on all the different walls. From there, students can do work, and then you can take a quick gander at what they're doing and take a look at whether or not they understood it and have students explain their thought process. One I love to do is something I call soulmates. Tell them I'm going to find their soulmate and then give them the direction that they have to stand up and find someone that's wearing similar shoes. Then they can discuss a prompt and share out. But once again, we're getting them up and moving. Which one does not belong is a good way to get students just to think right at the beginning of a class. Give maybe 4 options and ask them which one doesn't belong, knowing that there is no correct answer. Then students move to the part of the room that matches their answer, discusses it with some like-thinking people. Maybe they had different reasons for the same picture. And then we could share out so you could learn everyone's. Here, the first picture might be it's the only one that's a flower. The second one could be the only one that flies. The third one is the only one that's doesn't have any yellow in it. And the last one could be it's the only one that's in the sky. Or maybe the star is the only one that doesn't have any black in it. The flower could be the only one that has any orange. The bee, the only one that has wings. All right. The frog's the only one that shows 2 eyes. So there might be a lot of different things that students can think about. And I know that's not tied directly to your instruction, but to get students just up and thinking about something in the first couple of minutes of class can lead them to thinking more when you really want them to on the hard topics. So as far as the warm-up section, go ahead, and if you have anything that you want to take away from that, jot it down wherever you are. You always want to make sure to make little notes to go back to. Second section here, we're going to plan out a whole lesson it's going to get students moving. All right, we don't want them sitting, we want them to be moving and thinking. Here's 3 things to consider. There are several things to consider beyond this, but these are 3 major aspects. First is the physical layout of the room. Do you need to put your desks in a certain way? Do you need to have certain supplies? How are you going to be able to see what the students are doing and listening into their conversations? So thinking about how you need to have the room set up for that activity. Second one is the grouping of students. How are students going to know where they need to go and who they need to work with? Finding ways of randomizing things. And the third one being problem selection. You want to make sure that you engage in some thought-provoking problems so students aren't just trying to memorize things or follow exactly what their teacher has done, not really understand what the outcome is, but just that this seems like what we've done before. But really, what kind of problems get us to think for ourselves? When you think about that physical layout, here are some things that I think about. One, do I have dry erase boards up at places where I can have students show their thought process? Similar to that one, maybe instead of dry erase boards, you have posters up that students are making, sharing their thoughts on the posters. The one advantage to posters is that you typically keep those around your room, so you could reference them. Where dry erase, you usually erase. The good thing about dry erase is it's less expensive to be able to erase and do again than have to always get a new poster. Third one on here is technology. All right, we're going to have a whole section about technology, but do you need to physically lay out a way where students bring their certain part of technology with them? And then there's always other things to consider. So I don't want to limit you here. You might have a specific student that you're thinking of, or a subgroup of students, or just something with your activity that makes you lay something out in a different way. Next thing to consider is grouping students. Some randomization so that students work with different partners throughout your class. They get to hear how different people think. And also students need to know that it's fair randomization, that you didn't pick them ahead of time, that they saw exactly how this is. Sometimes students will start to think that they're being placed with people on purpose, that one person's supposed to do the thinking, which is why if you randomize in front of them, that takes that aspect out of it. Also, expectations, how to collaborate. Students don't know that off the top of their head, so you have to make sure that you model that. Also, for sharing, at the end of the activity, once you've had motion and you're working with your group and you've had your discussion, how do you want that sharing out to happen? Maybe there's a gallery walk. Maybe each group needs a spokesperson. Maybe you're going to call on 3 people every time at random, or maybe it's not so random. So go ahead and make sure that you teach those things. Next, with problem selection, I want to talk about general tasks and curriculum tasks. For general tasks, those are things that don't match up with your standards, but just get the students thinking. A good example of that was which one doesn't belong. Taking 2 minutes to have students think about that and think about how they reason could help the 48 minutes of a curriculum task to go better. Also, general tasks in the beginning of the year just to teach students how to collaborate are always a good idea. Curriculum tasks, on the other hand, go right to the standards and the skills that you're trying to teach them. But once again, you want to get deeper thought out of them, less memorization. So how can you pose questions that lead to that? So as you're thinking about posing a question, make sure it's not something that they could just rote memorize and spit back to you. Quick example here, which one holds more? So this is how I went through the thought process with one class at one point. The physical layout is that each group had a piece of poster paper, and those poster papers were labeled 1 through 10. And instead of having chairs to sit down for, the chairs separated the groups so you knew exactly where your standing place was. For grouping students, I had cards in my hand as they came in. They picked a card. And they went to that group and they had either 3 or 4 students to work with in order to discuss the topic. Then each group was given 2 glasses. Every group had the same ones. And they were asked which one's going to hold more. It was leading into a volume lesson, but one of them was taller and skinnier. The other one was wider but shorter. And students had to have different thought processes to try and figure out which one was going to hold more before sharing out at the end. So now that we've talked about planning out whole lessons, as that example was a elongated activity, which the discussion led for most of the class period. Go ahead and jot down anything that you want to remember. Next, we want to talk about technology. I know we went into COVID and everything went to technology. Then we came back into the classroom and now students are oftentimes staring at computer screens as they're doing their work. Some teachers say we need to totally get off of technology. Some teachers say this technology is great, we need to keep utilizing it. But now our thought process here is how can we make sure there's motion in the class, but also utilizes that technology? How can we bridge those two things together? So as we add motion to technology lessons, a couple things to think about. We could have students use their cell phones, but in a way that they need to for class, not just for texting each other and things like that. So maybe they have to access an app and do something with it. Laptops are mobile, so we can bring them to different places if your school is one-to-one with laptops. And most schools at this point are, after the pandemic really made those schools that weren't find a way of doing that. Also, be familiar with what your school district has as far as technologies and find out how to use those. For example, our school district is starting to increase which classrooms have screencasting. So if you give a student a code, they can share what's on their computer screen with the whole class. So knowing that that's accessible, if you have students up working together, but then together maybe they put together a one-pager on their computer, then each group can share that one at a time. Right? Maybe your school district uses Nearpod and you want to get all the students to get their thoughts in Nearpod so they can see them later, but also have those discussions. Speaking of Nearpod, there's tons of places you can get free accounts. So some examples of these are Kahoot, Nearpod, Desmos, Booklet, Quizzes, Quizlet, and there are tons of other interactive activities. Now, some have both free versions and pay versions, and your school district may be willing to buy the pay version, maybe not. I don't know. I know ours purchased Nearpod for everyone once the pandemic hit. But I know looking at these, and one I don't have down there is Padlet. I know I just have a free Padlet. It only lets you have 5 of them. So if you want to do another one, you have to delete an old one. So I don't use it that much. So that's fine by me. One other one that I have listed here, Canva is a great way for designing things. So if you need students to do one-pagers, maybe they can use Canva. If you need to design some lessons, maybe you use Canva. But then plan for ways that once you have this, now how can I get motion into my classroom as well? So not just sitting staring at a computer screen. One other thing, as I mentioned before, if there's one that you really like and you do see that there's more on a pay version, talk to your administration. The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, no, I'm sorry, we don't have the money for that. But you'll never know unless you ask. Here's an example. There's a math teacher who wants to teach about polynomial functions. They've set up a Desmos activity, which is an online activity. If you haven't used Desmos before, not only is that the graphing calculator that most things use nowadays, but you can also create lessons, and they have a lot of things that you could do with math that other places don't have. So there's this Desmos activity that this teacher wants their students to do, but they've decided to add motion into it. For the physical layout, each group has a dry erase board, and around the dry erase board are 3 desks, but they are lifted to be as tall as possible. So students aren't sitting at the desks, they're going to be standing around them. I actually saw a teacher do this before because they wanted students to be doing constructions with a compass and a straight edge, but they wanted them standing in groups. As far as grouping students, this teacher has popsicle sticks with their names on them. The students see them go around the room and call out names based on the popsicle sticks and put the popsicle sticks down at the different groups. Each student had to go to wherever their popsicle stick was. And then as they're working on the Desmos lesson, they can work things out on the dry erase board, and then students enter their answers in. That way, the whole class can see everybody's answer. So there's a way of taking that online task, but letting students move around the room. Let's say, and once again, I'm a math teacher by trade, so I was thinking, well, what if a language arts teacher is talking about character development in a novel? All right. Thought for this one, maybe for physical setup of the room. Locations around the room are listed by group number. Students are encouraged to have their phones out and log into the Padlet for class. Students select cards as they get in to be randomized groups. From there, the Padlet, and Padlet's just like a big board to put stickies on, but it's a virtual version of this. So for the problem, the Padlet has all the characters from the novel, and you have to discuss with your group, and then each person needs to add a sticky for each character about how they saw that character change throughout the novel. So really, let's say that there's 3 people per group, just as an example. Then really that group needs to come up with 3 different ways that you saw that character change and then add it to the Padlet. So you can use the technology while still moving around and collaborating with others. The last one I want to talk about is differentiation, that we can use movement in the classroom while differentiating our instruction. One structure I wanted to highlight is stations. And elementary school teachers typically do stations amazingly. And as we get older, we forget about the strategy sometimes. Well, let's say you have multiple activities going on in the class. Students move periodically. So maybe every 10 minutes, they have to get up and move to a new group. That means there's going to be motion every 10 minutes. All right. The teacher focuses on a specific task or group, and certain tasks or groups students can do independently. So maybe I'm envisioning one that has 3 stations, where there's one they're doing individually, one they're collaborating on, and then one they're working with the teacher. This was exactly what I was envisioning when I set up this example with Pythagorean theorem. As far as a physical layout, 3 stations are set up in this classroom. One, where students are going to sit with the teacher for some instruction. A second station where students are going to sit individually and do some practice. And a third station where they're going to do some problem solving standing up. As a grouping of students, this time we're actually not going to do randomized grouping, but we're going to take data from an assessment and put the students into 3 groups. Either they need reteaching, or they need more practice, or they're ready for a challenge. Then for the problem selection, the teacher's going to stay at station number 1, and then we're going to have another slide that's going to describe what each station does, or what each group will end up doing. Because it's differentiated, it might look a little different. Group 1 is going to start at the reteach. So group 1 starts with the teacher. Teacher's going to reteach the things that they got wrong on the test. Then when they rotate, they're going to do a practice of those skills. And then when they rotate again, they're going to do some problem solving directly tied to those skills. Group 2 is going to start with doing some of that practice that they were missing out on, that their teacher said, well, they don't really need to be retaught, but they need to practice this a little bit more. And they're going to have a way of checking their own answer. Then they're going to rotate to try the problem solving problem that goes with that. And then they're going to rotate back to the teacher station. There'll be the third one with the teacher, where the teacher is going to check in to see, do they need a little bit of reteach based on what they see there? Or can the teacher move on with something that's a little more challenging? Maybe not a new topic, but maybe it's about, if I have a shape, how I can make right triangles on the shape and find perimeter of the shape with it. And that's where I was envisioning the problem solving problem might be. Group 3, those students are going to start with the challenge because they, based on the assessment, already mastered all those concepts. Then they're going to meet with the teacher. Teacher's going to check in with them about their challenge, and they're going to teach them how to go further with this topic, further than what was expected. And then when they go to the third group, they are going to have a different practice sheet, but it's going to have them practice things that their teacher just taught them about. So they all have a rotation. You're differentiating what they have. but they have to get up every 10 minutes to move to a new group. And one of the three groups has them physically moving around trying to do something. I was envisioning on the ground, maybe with some painter's tape, some shapes are put on the ground and students need to find the perimeter just based on the tiles that are on the ground. Next thing I'm going to challenge you to do is take the handouts that there are. I have one handout that's specifically about differentiation and another one that takes you through planning out a lesson, and try to plan out how you could use this in one of your classes. So I'd say pause this and then try that and come on back. Now that you're back, that's the end of the information that we have. Go ahead and use this QR code for my evaluation. Please give me some great feedback. I appreciate you doing that. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for hundreds of free professional development videos to support teachers, students, and administrators. This is a free resource. Please take advantage and subscribe now. Please navigate to canyonpd.com. This is our one-stop shop for all that Canyon PD K-12 educational outreach has to offer. You will find information about our customized professional development as well as our PD on demand. Canyon PD solutions to go, low cost, and individually tailored to professional development. Connect with Canyon PD on social media. Access free resources, interact with our team, and find out about upcoming events.